So we were sent. I was sent a book not a book, a book from Sean. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right or wrong. So if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Sean, I do apologise. Sean Kachmarski, spelled Kachmarski. He's originally from Canada. He now lives in the UK. I think it's Yorkshire way. And he sent to me the book called Just Finish. Don't think you can. No, you can. And I took it away with me. And I started to read it and I got hooked. And it's very rare that I get hooked by a book.
I could listen to you say book all night, to be fair, Rob.
I was waiting for you to say something about me saying hooked, not hooked. I was hooked by the book. So I read the whole book whilst I was on holiday, all 244 pages of it, and it was and I'm not just saying this because it was sent to me. It was sent to me, but it is a really, really good book. So if you are interested in reading this book, you can get it on Amazon. I'm not sure it's that much on Amazon, and it will do Sean a big favour. I've left him a review as well on Amazon, and yeah, I have spoken to Sean as well over Instagram, and there's potential. So this might be another guest. This is where my networking comes in. That we're going to get him on, and he professes to. He talks about how fast he is, and he isn't a fast runner. He is one of them people that just goes out and gets it done, and loves running, keeps him well mentally and physically. He started running. I'm not going to spoil the book. We started running through a health scare, and he's just gone from strength to strength. So well done, Sean, and thank you for sending me the book. And I really, really enjoyed the book. So if anybody's interested, just finish. Don't think you can. No, you can. By Sean Kakmarski. But we're going to talk about a little bit of it because this is what stuck in my mind when I was reading it. Went to bed, was reading it in my bed, and I was like, oh, that's such a shame.
I can't read in bed, by the way.
Got
I
any
fall
more?
asleep instantly. Regardless of what I'm reading, I fall asleep instantly.
But I think the reason I read it because I don't normally read in bed. I normally put the telly on. That's a problem, and it's like then you can't switch off. But there's no telly at the caravan in the bedroom, so I was reading the book, and it does help me to sleep as well. So, but then I got into the book, and then you didn't want to put the book down. So then, um, but anyway, part of the book he talks about tries to run a marathon. So he starts running, and he never in a million years thinks about running a marathon. He signs up for Manchester Marathon, actually,
Oh,
bizarrely, and does the Manchester Marathon, does all the training, gets to the day, does his own pace. He always starts off too fast, and the book is really relatable because it's like I'm reading my story sometimes because I always start off too fast because I get drawn into the melee of what's happening on the day. But he runs this marathon, gets to 20 miles, and he's thinking to himself, "Oh, I've got 6 miles to go. Not far, not far." And he gets stopped.
hey?
He gets stopped. So one of the marshals comes over to him and says, "You can't run anymore because of the road. They're going to have to reopen the road, and it's not safe for you to carry on running." And by his own admission, he is a slow runner, so I'm not sure how long he was running for, but he was stopped. So he DNF'd, and he was picked up by a bus and taken back to the finish. And his mum had come over from Canada, and his loved ones were there, so his wife was there and his two kids, and it was gutting for him. So it got me thinking about not finishing races and was that fair? Has that happened to anybody else in the past? Because I've never experienced that. Every race I've gone into, I've always finished. I know I've done that many, but have you ever not finished a race? Have you ever
I don't.
through? It could be through a couple of reasons. Obviously, Sean was stopped, but I was thinking to myself, it could be through
Like, go
injury.
into it.
Somebody
It
gets
could
in.
be injury. It could be, maybe sickness, needing the toilet. It could be an emergency comes up and you can't finish the race. It's not. It's not happened to me. I mean, she won't mind me saying it. It happened to Rachel. We were doing Henley Regatta. I think it was Henley down south, Henley Half Marathon. And we set off and did the race, I finished, and then I always like looked down the finish line thinking, oh, Rachel's going to be finishing in a minute about her sort of time. She should be coming through. And then I was like a bit worried, where is she? Turned around and there she was wrapped in a foil blanket.
Oh,
And I mean, it's quite funny when you think back on it now, but she was wrapped in a foil blanket. She'd like twisted her ankle literally a couple of 100 meters into the run, and they put her into like the back of an ambulance to keep her warm until I'd finished.
yeah.
And it's one of those things. The reason I say that is because with this guy here who's written the book, you could get a DNF for whatever reason. And Rachel got hers through injury. He got his because he was told he couldn't carry on, which I think is appalling, by the way.
I know, I've done
Um,
that as well.
the main thing is, I think that whatever happens, the reason why you get it, you got to carry on.
Yeah.
You've got to use that
And
as an inspiring thing to say, look,
yeah.
motivational thing. I'm not going to let that happen to me again. And if it's because you feel like you're too, people are telling you too slow, it might motivate you to get a little bit quicker. It might motivate you to go, well, actually, I'm going to enter different events, and you're going to tell us obviously a little bit about what he went on to do potentially, or the book does.
Yeah.
And if it comes down to injury, use it as a way to say, I'm not going to get injured again. I'm going to prepare. I always talk about processes. Make sure you do a warm up, make sure you do your stretches, make sure you do your dynamic movements, make sure you fuel
Yeah.
properly. So whatever reason you get a DNF for, it's a learning option. You know,
Yeah.
I've coached people
Yeah.
for a good couple of years now, and I've come across a few people that have DNF'd, and I'm working with a couple now to try and get better processes, because in my experience of those people, it was processes: overhydrating, underhydrating, underfueling. And I think you've just got to look at that experience to try and learn from it.
Yeah. I've come close, I must admit. The last pot was off. I came close.
The
It
heat.
was that hot. The heat, all my life, honestly. I nearly got to like, it was like halfway through, and I thought, I can't do this. I can't, I physically can't do it. But I just slowed down because I said, if I felt to myself, if I don't slow down and I don't take on some hydration, I won't stop. I'll have to stop.
Yeah.
I won't have a choice. Somebody will have to stop me, or I will pass out.
And this is the process thing. It's about, I mean, you can't control everything.
No.
You can't control the weather. You can't control the heat. You can't control how
No.
cold it's going to be. But you can control things like your pre-fueling, your during race fueling, the week and building up to that. Are you hydrating properly? Have you got the right kit? Are you looking at the weather forecast to make sure you've got these things planned for? But sometimes it will just happen. And I think I've certainly not finished training sessions. I mean, it happened to me last week. And I think this is the important thing. It's why we push ourselves hard in training, is to sort of learn a little bit about our limits. And if we can push ourselves to our limits, the body comes back stronger. And also psychologically, it gives you that sort of feeling, well, I don't want that to happen to me again.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be said about, like, psychologically what you take from these experiences.
Yeah. I'm not going to spoil what happens in the book. But obviously, it's had an impact. I only talked so far. I'm not, no, you have to read it. But it's it had an impact, and it demotivated him quite a lot. But he came back and he went on to do bigger and better things. So he used that negative and turned it into a positive. And he talks about it in the book, how it had an impact, and then how it pushed him to get better, to be able to go back and do another marathon. He does a marathon, bit of a spoiler alert. So he actually does complete another marathon, and that takes a lot.
Yeah.
I would say to go to a point of where you DNF because you stopped, to go back and do another marathon. He did another marathon in another country, and his experience of another marathon in another country was complete opposite. And like I say, being stopped, I can understand, absolutely, I can understand the reasonings that they might stop here because of the roads having to reopen and things, but I always think there should be, if they're going to stop you, there should be an alternative route that you can do, that you can go on the paths or whatever. But they just stopped him and says, no, you can't finish. He talks about it in the book that there was a couple of women dressed up as a chicken and a fox, And they basically said, "I'm not stopping. I'm carrying on," and they finished the marathon,
Yeah.
which is quite funny. And like I say, it's not a nice thing, but he used it to motivate himself. So we are going to get Sean on. I think he's a really the way that I read the book, and I put it on Amazon. It just felt like I was talking to him about it in the pub, and the way that he comes across, and the way that he puts little jokes in there, and I think it'd be really good on the podcast, and I think people will really relate to him. He's on YouTube. Sean Speaks on YouTube. That's what his channel is called. I think he's all over Instagram. He's on Facebook, I think, as well. So reach out to him and speak to him, and like I say, we'll get him on the podcast and we can ask him a few more questions. And if he wants to spoil the book, he can spoil the book.
Let's get him on.
Uh,
Get him on.
yeah, well, I'll arrange it, and we'll get him on. And it's made me want to write a book, bizarrely, about my experiences of running, because I've started from similar kind of grounding, really, that not running at all, to a point of where I've ran a marathon and running another
You know what I've
marathon,
looked?
and I haven't got time, mate. I wish I could. I haven't got time. But maybe if he comes on the podcast and he helps me out, and maybe he gives me a bit of tips and advice,